Hi, this is Dr. Kevin Windisch. I'm thinking I'm going to start dropping the where I'm from part because, well, my practice has been closed for a few years and I'm coming to you now from somewhere in the deep south, remaining somewhat nameless. Uh, but yeah, I'm no longer in Sparks, Nevada. Anyway, today's video goes out to uh, a dear friend of mine who asked me to discuss something, and as you know, I take requests. So this goes out to you, Fabio. We've been friends for more years than I care to admit, because I don't want to admit I'm that old. Um, but we've been friends from the beginning of time, fifth, sixth grade, something like that. And Fabio serves as my philosopher as much as anything, and brings up some good points. So what he wanted me to discuss, and I think it merits some discussion, is what are the implications of the world we're living in right now today, which is April 18th, 2020, the middle of COVID, quarantine, lockdown, social isolation, whatever the heck it is you want to call it. But he wanted me to look at the non-medical implications of that. The media does better than great job of presenting the medical tragedy that's happening every day in our country and our world right now, and they play it up, but nobody talks about the non-medical end. What is the consequence of both the package, right? Because we have this disease, COVID-19, we have no cure for it. Nobody knows what the heck to do for it. And so as a result, we're all locked in our houses. Nobody's going to work, except for a lucky few. And those who have jobs aren't sure if they're going to wake up and have a job tomorrow. And nobody's sure how they're going to feed their families, and kids aren't sure when they're going to see their friends again. So there's a lot of implications for a lot of people, and a lot of this might be um, obvious. And so if I'm being Captain Obvious today, well, that's okay, forgive me. And if I'm not being obvious, well, then this is for you. So in medicine, we're taught to use what we refer to as the biopsychosocial model for patient care and patient interactions. And that includes both with regards to how we diagnose a patient, how we treat a patient, and all of our interactions with the patient. The bio part for us as physicians is pretty easy because that's what we all went to school to study. We got undergraduate degrees, most of us, in some sort of biology. And then doctorates in medicine, we know how the heart works and how the muscles of the heart works and how the valves work and the various parts of the brain, and we've looked at them and held the brains in our hands, and we've looked at them under a microscope. I've run my hands through across every nerve in the human body from where it starts up in the brain to where it terminates in your toe, and I've followed its entire course, including your entire spinal column. And under a microscope, I've played with nerves and I've added chemicals to them and watched how they fired and watched their electric function and watched how certain medications modulate the effects of those nerves. And I've grown bacteria and viruses because I used to work in a microbiologic immunology lab where we grew up viruses to do our experiments. Most undergrads and even med students don't actually grow viruses in labs because it's kind of expensive and rather pointless because you can't see them under a microscope. But I did research where I actually did that. So I've grown up viruses, I've grown up bacteria, I've grown up yeast. Same yeast used to make bread, by the way. So yeah, with COVID lockdown and yeast being bought out of the grocery stores, I'm good. I can still bake. I just haven't because once you grow up yeast, you're kind of committed to raising a baby until either you can guarantee good yeast supplies from the grocery store or You get tired of doing it, and once you kill it off, you got to start all over again. So anyway, I've grown yeast. I mean, we've done the whole 9 yards. Prescribe medicine, make diagnosis, shoot X-rays. I know how X-rays work. Blah blah blah. That's the biologic end. Okay, that one's easy. In this case, the biologic end is COVID-19, acute respiratory distress syndrome, perhaps dementia, perhaps renal failure, electrolyte dysmetabolism. Other biologic things we're taught to think about include Plaquenil, hydroxychloroquine. Is it safe? What does it do to your heart? Is it really a danger? Remdesivir, blah, blah, blah. That's the biologic end. Still scientifically speaking, the next end is the psychologic end. And it tends to get shortchanged in medicine. People pass it off. I don't want to spend my time with that fuzzy, soft stuff. Give me science. It's actually rather scientific and very important to consider, especially in this world. So let's look at the psychologic end of what all of this is doing to people. And my goal here is not necessarily to assign fault with anything we're doing, but there are consequences for everything we do. Social isolation causes a lot of depression. Not knowing if you're going to have a job tomorrow, or if you have already lost your job, not knowing how you're going to feed your family or yourself tomorrow. Are you going to lose your house? Are you going to lose everything you built? Are you going to lose your retirement? You're 60 years old. That results in a lot of anxiety. Anxiety then results in depression, so you can have anxiety with depressed mood, or depressed mood with anxious, depression with anxious mood, or pure anxiety, pure depression. Can definitely make you suicidal. Being ripped away from your friends. Kids feel out of control. Kids in particular need structure, and their structure involves going to school a couple days a week. Now we've taken that away from them. They don't get to see their friends anymore. Even the kids, I mean, I work with kids. I'm a pediatrician. I do adolescent medicine these days. My teens, even my teens who hated school, are these days missing school. My scouts are all dying to go back to school. Even the ones who are homeschooled are looking forward to everybody else going back to school. At least it's normal. Their school didn't change, but their world's not normal, and they don't like that. Neither do the rest of us. Post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, is a form of anxiety. So years later, we may be dealing with people with nightmares and flashbacks and anxiety and irritability. That irritability is a form or a manifestation of the symptoms of depression and anxiety. Somewhere kind of bordering biology and social aspect of medicine come a series of disorders that impact your social life as much as the psychologic life, and have some biologic implications as well. Substance use goes through the roof during this time. Britain was announcing people were stockpiling street drugs. So they were stockpiling heroin. So while you were busy buying your toilet paper, opiate addicts in Europe have been demonstrated to be stockpiling their heroin. Believe me, they're doing it here in the United States too. And they're not just stockpiling it, they're using it. And, why do we care? Well, obviously, as a physician, I care about the individual impact on the human life and the individual patients. But as a society as a whole, then we have a cohort of worsening drug addicts. With that's going to come worsening drug violence and interpersonal violence, death, suicide, death from overdose, suicidality, homicide, suicides. Somebody kills their entire family and kills themselves after being cooped up in a building with them for 2 months and not able to go to work. went from recreational use, if there is such a thing, of heroin to, or more commonly methamphetamine, to violent use, to violence that ends in disaster. These are the sorts of things we're starting to see. And in fact, statistics are already kind of showing that as the stress has gone up, phone calls to suicide hotlines, at least one suicide hotline is reporting an 800 times increase. So 800% increase in phone calls. No, 800 times the number of phone calls versus a year ago. So that's a lot of zeros. 80,000% increase in phone calls. My concern is in 6 months, the phone calls are going to stop coming into the suicide hotline. And they're not going to stop coming in because people got better. And they're not going to stop coming in because the symptoms miraculously went away. As part of all of the stresses that go with this, then comes some of the more social stuff, which still has medical and psychologic implications for the patients. As a pediatrician, risks of or incidences of child abuse have shot through the roof. All forms, verbal, sexual, physical abuse. Rates of interpersonal violence with adults, so spousal abuse, have gone up, some of which are related to drinking, some of which are just related to stress, some of which are made worse, all of which are made worse by the fact that people have nowhere to go. I have patients right now, lived where I work, but can no longer live there because the center's closed, so now they're in homeless shelters. But their life in those shelters is tenuous at best because they're in the middle of gender transition, and whether you believe in transgender or agree with it or disagree with whatever your personal thoughts are, that's where this patient is today. You don't have to like it. They are there today. And this particular individual who I'm picturing is female with a pretty thick beard and has nowhere to go. So she is going to be kicked out of her homeless shelter. And yeah, she's got other psychiatric illness that precludes her from being particularly cooperative. And she's not on her meds because, well, center's been closed, so she has no access to meds. And if we're not buying them for her, then nobody's buying them for her. And if we're not handing them to her each morning, she's not taking them. So she's out on the street being beaten and robbed and whatever else is out there. This is all consequences in our society. When we start to put the world back together, we're going to have to take people like her and try to put them back together again too. So yeah, these are things we're going to have to think about. People not working. Somebody my wife interacts with through locations that shall remain nameless, and aspects of her life that we're not going to discuss here on the internet, but that she interacts with daily, currently eating one meal a day. Husband can't work because of COVID, and so her nutrition is significantly impacted. And a lot of kids get their meals through the schools now. At least where I'm living, the school districts are trying to get food to the kids, but quite honestly, it's not as successful as it should be. Reno, they're trying to get food to the poor kids there, but it's not as successful as having the schools in session. So a lot of people aren't getting food, so nutrition is now an issue. So these again are the things that we're dealing with and going to have to put back together again. Once we put society back, we're going to have to look at the nutritional status of a lot of people and try to correct some deficiencies. Once we put society back. We've got to deal with a lot of psychologic damage that's been done to a lot of people and some physical damage as well. So these are things to keep a watch for in your family and loved ones, because we're all at risk. We're all dealing with some variant of this. So that's really what I want to talk about today. I'm wishing you all good luck and Godspeed, and may our world get back together soon. This is Dr. Windisch, formerly from Sparks Pediatrics, now in the Deep South. And Fabio, this one's for you.